I saw a Jomon pot in the Dallas Museum when I was about 18 years old. I had no ceramics background, and when I looked at this particular piece, it had such a sense of beauty to it that it just blew me away. I've always had that image in my mind. My attitude here at St. Mark's has always been that I wanted to be the best art teacher that I could possibly be, and I always wanted to be building on the knowledge that I already had. So during that time, in the early 70s, I decided that I would buy myself a potter's wheel and teach myself to throw pots.
So in ceramics, patience is probably the most important quality you have because the processes each take a lot of time, and if you're not patient, you're going to end up messing up a lot of pieces or not getting the colors you want in the firing and stuff like that. So you have to be really patient with the work that you're doing in order to get a good quality.
Wedging is the process of removing the air bubbles by molding the clay with your hands and turning it into a cylinder before throwing.
It gets rid of the air bubbles to make it easier to throw, and it gets all the clay particles to save moisture. If you don't wedge your piece properly, then some parts of the clay will be wet, some parts of the clay will be dry, and you'll have some air bubbles in your pot. Air bubbles cause for a lot of problems down the road of making your pot, and that's why you try to get rid of them as soon as possible. The next step in the process is throwing, where you center the clay on the wheel by continually bringing the clay up and down, compressing it down on the wheel, opening it to get a nice small cylinder, and then gradually doing pulls to bring the cylinder up. And then once you have the tall centered cylinder, you make the form.
You have to relate to the material. You have to sense what we call the nature of clay. You have to know how hard or how soft the clay is in order to know how much pressure to exert.
Next is the process of glazing, in which we paint glaze onto the piece you just threw. Different glazes will produce different colors on your piece once it's fired.
You can either dip your pot in glaze or you can brush the glaze on. The main advantage of dipping your pot is the glaze will come out more consistent, but if you want a precise design, brushing the glaze on is the best way to do that.
The next step is the firing process. For this, you take an already bisqued piece and you put it in the kiln. You heat it up to 1850. The variance in time accounts for the change of the colors. And once it reaches 1850, you take the piece out and you can put it in a trash bin filled with newspaper that will also alter the colors. And once that's done, in about an hour or 45 minutes, you can take out the piece and see how it went.
I tried to incorporate various textures in my work to convey a sense of movement. For me, the texture that I incorporate reminds me of the waves, and I think that's another dimension that the viewer can explore.
It's a kinesthetic experience which is similar to the beauty of, say, maybe a basketball player or a dancer. That their entire body and mind is involved in the process. Part of the process of creating the piece is metaphysical and it's more philosophy. So making pottery for me is like meditation. So I can completely just be centered with the clay. And that analogy is used a lot about centering the clay and becoming centered as a person. So when I'm in the process of making a pot, I'm becoming a better person than I was the moment before I started making that pot. And every time I make a piece, that happens.